I thought my dad abandoned us, but 20 years later I found his hidden letters. Growing up, I genuinely believed my father just walked out one day and never looked back. That's what my mom told me anyway. That's what everyone told me. I was 7 years old when he disappeared. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of gray, Ohio day where the sky feels too low and the air smells like wet leaves. I remember coming home from second grade, kicking through piles on the sidewalk, excited because Dad had promised we'd build a fort in the backyard that weekend. I burst through the front door yelling, "Dad, I got a gold star on my spelling test." But the house was quiet, too quiet. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Her eyes were red. She looked up at me and forced this tiny smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. "Sweetie," she said, voice cracking. "Daddy had to go away for a while. I asked when he was coming back. She said she didn't know. I asked if he was on a work trip. She just shook her head and pulled me into a hug that felt more like she was holding herself together through me. That night, I waited by the window until way past bedtime. Streetlights came on, cars passed. No Dad. The next morning, his truck was gone from the driveway. His work boots weren't by the door. His coffee mug wasn't in the sink. Half his clothes were missing from the closet. It was like someone erased him. Mom sat me down a few days later and said the adult version. Dad left us. He didn't want to be a husband or a father anymore. He chose to start over somewhere else. I didn't understand how that was possible. Dad was the guy who let me steer the lawnmower while sitting on his lap. He made the best grilled cheese with the crust cut off exactly diagonal. He called me captain and pretended my plastic sword could defeat any monster under the bed. How does someone like that just decide they're done? Money got tight fast. Mom picked up double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide. We moved from our little blue house with the big maple tree to a cramped two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The dryers thumped through the floor all night. I learned real quick how to stretch a box of macaroni and how to pretend I wasn't hungry so Mom could eat more. I stopped asking about Dad after a while because every time I did, Mom's face would crumple like wet paper. By the time I was 10, I'd built this story in my head. Dad was selfish. Dad was weak. Dad didn't love us enough to stay. It helped me make sense of the hole he left. Anger is easier to carry than sadness when you're a kid. Middle school and high school weren't much better. Kids can smell struggle. I wore the same 3 hoodies on rotation. Mom couldn't always pay the electric bill on time. I got good at dodging questions about my dad. If anyone asked, I'd shrug and say, "He's not around." Most people stopped asking. I threw myself into school because it was something I could control. Straight A's, soccer team, yearbook staff, anything to stay busy and out of the apartment. Mom was proud but exhausted. She aged 10 years and 5. I promised myself I'd never be like him. I'd never abandon anyone who depended on me. College was community college first, then state school on scholarships and loans. I studied nursing, same field as Mom. Ironic, I know, because I wanted to help people who were hurting the way we'd hurt. I graduated debt-free by the skin of my teeth, landed a decent job in the ER back in Columbus. Mom finally moved out of that awful apartment into a small one-bedroom. Things were looking up. Then right after I turned 27, Mom got sick. It started with a cough she couldn't shake, then weight loss, then the diagnosis, stage 3 lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life. Just bad luck and maybe all those years breathing. Dryer lint and hospital disinfectant. She fought hard. Chemo, radiation, clinical trials. I took family leave, moved back in with her to help. Nights were the worst, when the pain meds wore off and she couldn't sleep. We'd sit up in her living room, watching old game shows on low volume, me holding her hand while she drifted in and out. One night, about 6 months into treatment, she was having a rare good evening. Pain was manageable. She was chatty. We were laughing about something stupid from when I was little, how I once tried to rescue a goldfish by putting it in the bathtub and it belly flopped to freedom down the drain. Out of nowhere, she got quiet, looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "There's something I need to tell you before I can anymore." My stomach dropped. I thought she was going to say the cancer had spread further, but no. She told me to go into her bedroom closet, top shelf, blue shoebox tucked behind her winter sweaters. I found it exactly where she said. Old Nike box, lid half torn. Inside were hundreds of envelopes, all addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 7. My dad's handwriting. Every single envelope had my name and our old address, the blue house we lost after he left. Every single one was stamped. Return to sender. Recipient unknown. There had to be at least 200 letters. Some thick, some just a single page. The postmark started 3 months after he left and continued every few weeks for almost 20 years. The most recent one was dated 4 months ago. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the first one. It was from 2006. He wrote about how sorry he was that he hadn't been there for my 8th birthday. Said he'd sent a present, some Lego set I'd been begging for, but it came back undelivered. He asked about school, about soccer, about whether I still liked dinosaurs. He ended it with, "I love you more than you'll ever know, Captain." I opened another. 2008. He'd heard from a mutual friend that we'd moved. He didn't have the new address. He'd driven by the old house and seen strangers living there. He wrote that he sat in his truck and cried like a baby. Another from 2012. He'd seen pictures of me at my high school graduation on a friend's Facebook. Said I looked tall and handsome in my cap and gown. Said he was so proud but wished he could have been in the audience clapping loudest. I sat on Mom's bedroom floor, surrounded by 2 decades of letters my father had written and I'd never received. I read until my eyes burned. He never stopped writing. not once. When I went back to the living room, Mom was asleep on the recliner. I waited until morning. I asked her why. She cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry, even during chemo. She told me everything. Dad didn't leave us willingly. He'd been struggling with depression for years, something nobody talked about back then, especially not working class guys in Ohio. After I was born, it got worse. He felt like he was failing us because he couldn't shake it. He was drinking too much to cope. One night he and Mom had a huge fight. He said things he didn't mean. She said things she didn't mean. He stormed out. He came back the next morning to apologize. But Mom, scared and angry and trying to protect me, told him if he couldn't get help and stay sober, he wasn't welcome back. She gave him an ultimatum: treatment or divorce. He chose treatment, checked himself into an inpatient program 3 hours away in Cleveland. He thought it would be 30 days and then he could come home clean and better. But Mom, still furious and overwhelmed with a 7-year-old alone, filed for divorce while he was in rehab. She told the judge he'd abandoned us because he wasn't there to contest it and because he felt so much shame. He didn't fight the ruling. He signed whatever papers they sent. The court ordered supervised visitation, but Mom moved us twice in the first year after the divorce. Once to the apartment, then to another town when she got a better job. She never forwarded the address. She told herself it was to protect me from an alcoholic father who might relapse. She told herself he'd stop trying eventually, but he never did. He got sober, stayed sober, got a steady job as a mechanic, lived in a tiny apartment, sent child support every month even though Mom returned every check with refused written across it. And he wrote to me every holiday, every birthday, random Tuesdays when he just missed me. He respected the distance because he thought that's what was best for me. He thought I hated him. He thought I was better off without him. Mom admitted all of it that morning. She said she'd been too proud, too hurt, too scared to admit she'd made a mistake. She thought if she let him back in and he relapsed, it would destroy me worse. She convinced herself cutting him out completely was mercy. By the time she realized how wrong she'd been, years had passed. She was ashamed, and she didn't know how to fix it without blowing up the story I'd built my whole life around. The last letter, the one from 4 months ago, was different. In it, Dad wrote that he'd been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Early stage, good prognosis, but it made him think about time. He said he was still writing because it was the only way he knew how to be my father, even from a distance. He said if I ever wanted to find him, he'd be waiting. He left his phone number and address in Akron. I called him that same day. He answered on the second ring with a quiet, "Hello?" like he was afraid of who might be on the other end. I said, "Hi, this is your son." There was total silence. Then this broken sound, like a sob trying to climb out but getting stuck. He kept saying, oh God, over and over. We talked for 3 hours. I cried, he cried. He apologized 1,000 times. I told him he didn't need to. I told him about the letters. He couldn't believe Mom had kept them all. 2 days later, he drove to Columbus. I met him in the hospital parking lot while Mom was at an appointment. He stepped out of his truck, older, grayer, thinner, but still the same walk, same nervous smile. I recognized him instantly. We hugged like we were trying to make up for 20 lost years in one squeeze. He met Mom that same week. It was awkward. A lot of tears. A lot of I'm sorry, but healing started. Mom passed 9 months later. Dad and I were both by her side holding her hands. In her final days, she kept saying she was sorry to both of us. We told her we forgave her. I think she finally believed it. After the funeral, Dad moved into Mom's place to help me sort through everything. That's when we found one more thing tucked under her bed, a second shoebox. Inside were carbon copies of every letter Dad had sent me. Mom had kept one for herself each time. She'd read them. All those years, she'd read his words to me and never let me see them. On the top copy, in her handwriting, she'd written a note dated 2 years ago. I was wrong. He never stopped loving our boy. I robbed them both. Dad and I have spent the last year catching up. He comes to every family gathering now, Thanksgiving, Christmas, random barbecues. He's teaching my niece how to throw a spiral football. He's the grandpa I never knew I had. Sometimes people ask how I can forgive so easily after believing he abandoned me for so long. I tell them the truth. He didn't abandon me. Life and fear and pride and mental illness and bad decisions did. But love stayed in the fight. It just got lost in the mail for 20 years. And now that we found it, we're not letting go.